our next group here joins us from Nogales High School here in Arizona. They are part of the Sports Analytics Club program. Robert Clayton down here, raise your hand real quick. It's a really cool organization that is helping students gain aptitude and access to sports analytics. So if you're interested in being able to help out with something like that, please find Robert throughout the conference. So to turn it over to the students.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. My name is Renee Brown, and I'm here with the rest of my peers. It's Erick Figueroa, Pamela Carbajal, and John Nunez. And today we're here to show a portfolio for the induction into the Hall of Fame for a specific player named Kenny Lofton. So here you can see Kenny Lofton's player bio. He was born in May 31st of 1967. He bats and throws left and left. He is 6 feet, weighs 180, has an OBP of 0.372. And the teams that he played for were the Astro Indians or Guardians, Braves, White Sox, Giants, Pirates, Cubs, Yankees, Phillies, Dodgers, and Rangers. So the significant MLB accomplishments that Kenny Lofton has gained was he's a 6-time All-Star. He has 2 World Series appearances in the years of 1995 and 2002. He is as well a 4-time Gold Glove Award winner. He has 622 stolen bases overall, leaving him in the 15th in MLB history for the most stolen bases. He as well has a record for most stolen bases in postseason. And he's a member of the Cleveland Indians/Guardians Hall of Fame. Now, some of the stats that we'll be going over are going to be shown in 3 key groups. So some of the groups would be the Hall of Fame group. So these are all center fielders in the Hall of Fame, as well as the peer group. These are all players who are within the years of Lofton. But the thing is that they're not in the Hall of Fame at all, as well as base stealers. So these are the group of leading base stealers within the MLB history. Now, this goal of the presentation is to demonstrate that Kenny Lofton deserves to be in the National Baseball Hall of Fame as an elite center fielder, hitter, and base stealer. Now, the stats that will be considered overall are going to be in 3 categories. This will be offensive stats, defensive stats, and overall performance stats. So for offensive stats, it'll be the stolen bases, which he has 622 stolen bases. From there, he has defensive stats, which is defensive wins above replacement of D-WAR of a 15.5. From there, the total zone/total zone with location data of 115. Then overall performance stats would be wins above replacement, so WAR of a 68.4. To add on, JAW wins above replacement score, so JAWs of 55.9. And then peak wins above replacement, which is peak WAR of 43.5. Again, these are the stats that will be shown throughout the whole presentation. So time to go into the groups. So the Hall of Fame group are some of these players that will be taken into consideration. So some of these would be Mickey Mantle, Joe DiMaggio, and Andrew Dawson. From there, the peer group, so it'll be 11, and some of the players that will be considered is Johnny Dana, Steve Fennell, and Devin White. And time for historic base stealers. So for the historic base stealers, we're only going to take into 6. And it would be Eddie Collins, Max Carey, and T.Y. Cobb. So these players all have a minimum of 730 total stolen bases. They rank in the top 10 of stolen bases of a lifetime. So to continue on, I'll pass it on for overall worthiness to Erick Figueroa.
Test. Okay, thank you, Renee. Yeah, as she mentioned, I will be speaking about the overall worthiness of Kenny Lofton. So the metrics that we tracked, I mean, I'm sure you all know what these are as we're in a SABR conference, but we tracked wins above replacement, which is WAR, which was basically how many more wins Kenny Lofton got if you were compared to just a replacement level player. Peak WAR, which is WAR, but the sum of the 7 highest annuals. And Jaffe wins above replacement, which is JAWS, which is the same thing as WAR, but compared to a Hall of Fame player instead. In this slide, you can see Kenny Lofton's WAR versus the Hall of Fame group, where you can see on the graph, he's in the top percentile of the people he's compared to with his WAR of 68.4, beating valuable center fielders such as Duke Snyder, Andre Dawson, Richie Ashburn, Larry Doby, and Kirby Puckett. This slide, you can see Kenny Lofton's WAR versus the peer group, where you can see on the graph that he beats all of his competition with his WAR of 68.4, showing how valuable was to his team's success, which I think is pretty obvious if you've seen film. He helped create one of the biggest comebacks in baseball history, and if you've just seen like his center field catches, they've just been phenomenal. This slide shows Kenny Lofton's peak WAR versus the Hall of Fame group, where he beats 3 center fielders, Hall of Fame center fielders, which are Larry Doby, Andre Dawson, and Kirby Puckett with his peak WAR of 43.5. This slide, you can see Kenny Lofton's peak WAR versus the peer group, where once again, he beats all of his competition except Andrew Jones, who could also soon be in the Hall of Fame, with again, his peak WAR of 43.5. This slide shows Kenny Lofton's JAWS versus the Hall of Fame group, where he ranks about the center, beating valuable center fielders such as Kirby Puckett, Larry Doby, Andre Dawson, and Richie Ashburn, with his JAWS of 55.9. This slide shows Kenny Lofton's JAWS versus the peer group, where once again, you can see on the graph, he beats all of his competition. And the person who comes second is once again, Andrew Jones. But yeah, Kenny Lofton's JAWS of 55.9 shows how valuable he truly is to his team's success. To summarize the overall performance, we tracked WAR, peak WAR, and JAWS to measure both offensive and defensive value. Kenny Lofton had the highest JAWS in his peer group and was top 5 in the Hall of Fame group. And Kenny Lofton had the highest WAR in his peer group and was top 4 in the Hall of Fame group. I believe these results show that Kenny Lofton provided very significant value to his teams. His performance exceeds that of several players who have already been elected into the Hall of Fame. I'll now pass it on to Pamela to do the offensive stats.
So thank you. Now we will talk about Kenny Lofton's offensive stats. Stealing bases is really important in baseball. You either help your team with an advantage, getting them closer to scoring a run, or you further backtrack your team when you fail that stealing that base. One of Kenny Lofton's most potent weapons was his ability to steal bases. He created notable offensive advantages for his team and also disrupted the rhythm of his opposing teams. In this part of the presentation, we will quantify Lofton's base stealing abilities and compare them to other players of his time and to the Hall of Fame players. In this slide, we see Kenny Lofton compared to the Hall of Fame group. We see that Kenny Lofton surpasses everybody with a stolen base success rate of 79.5 except for Mickey Mantle, meaning that out of 782 bases, he was able to steal 622 bases. If we look at the graph, Kenny Lofton's bar is the deep red. We can see under stolen bases that his bar is significantly greater than the other players. Same as in the stolen base attempts, his bar is greater. If we look at the stolen base success rate, his is able to go above the other players, except for Mickey Mantle, that is slightly greater. In this slide, we see Kenny Lofton compared to the historic base stealers. Kenny Lofton had more seasons with 20 or more stolen bases than four all-time great base stealers. Kenny Lofton also had 70 plus more stolen base seasons than all-time great Eddie Collins. To summarize, Kenny Lofton is 15th of all time for stolen bases and 4th all-time stolen bases among center fielders. There are only 9 Hall of Fame players that play all positions with more stolen bases than Kenny Lofton. And there are only 3 Hall of Fame players that are center fielders with more stolen bases than Kenny Lofton. Kenny Lofton has the highest stolen base total when compared to his center fielder peers. As we can see, Kenny Lofton's offensive stats are impressive and shows that he's not only a great hitter, but as well as a great base runner as well. Again, he is 15th of all time in stolen bases and 4th of all time against his peers. He surpasses every player in his peer group by a minimum of 64 stolen bases, and he has the highest stolen base success rate when compared to the peer group and the second highest when compared to the 8 Hall of Fame center fielders. Now I'll pass it on to John to talk about his defensive stats. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. I wanted to say the test joke, but Erick beat me to it, so I'll get right into the defense. So this is Kenny Lofton's D-WAR versus the Hall of Fame group, and Kenny Lofton had a D-WAR of 15.5, and you can see he clears all the Hall of Fame center fielders that we had chosen. And going into his peer group, Kenny Lofton is top 3, and this was an era where center fielding was more prevalent for his peer group. And this Kenny Lofton's total zone versus the Hall of Fame group, again, he clears all the other 8 Hall of Fame center fielders with the total zone of 115. And similar to his D WAR, Kenny Lofton ranks top 3 versus his peer group with the same total zone of 115. So concluding his defensive stats, Kenny Lofton's D WAR and total zone clear those of the Hall of Famers, and compared to his peer group, he is top 3. So for conclusion, Kenny Lofton also won 4 Gold Gloves throughout his career, 6-time All-Star. This man was, in my opinion, he played in an era where his skill set was not well recognized. If you're retired today, or I mean, if he was elected to Hall of Fame again, I think that he would be a top 10 center fielder of all time. And if you go to his Hall of Fame class that he was going to be elected in 2013, this was right when baseball analytics was becoming more popular. This was an unlucky time for him. He was 9 votes off from being able to be on the ballot again next year, but hopefully with next year in 2025, he is eligible to be on the ballot again. And this man, just a man of heartbreak, 11 postseasons and not being able to take a ring home, 2 World Series appearances. He was very underrated for his position throughout his entire career. He brought so much success to the 11 teams that he played on. And I feel like a lot of the media backlashed him, even though he played for 11 teams, was a bit of a journeyman. He couldn't stay to one team. And like, as you can see, his stats, they're not cherry picked. This man was good. This man played in an era that if he played today, I think that his stats would be a lot more recognized. Again, he passes the eye test more than anyone. I think that in football nowadays, baseball nowadays, I think that this is it'd be more fun to watch Kenny Lofton play. He was a very fun player to watch. And in conclusion, Kenny Lofton deserves to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame, given his overall ability as a hitter, base stealer, and elite center fielder. These are acknowledgements of our advisors and mentors. We want to send a thank you to our teacher, our mentor, Mr. Robbie Dutz, up there in the corner. And again, a thank you to Robert Clayton, the CEO of Sports Analytics Club. And these are references for our background information and our sources. Thank you. This concludes our presentation, and we'd like to open the floor to questions.
Hey, that was really good. Thanks for sharing that. I agree. Kenny Lofton should be in the Hall of Fame. You mentioned at the beginning and towards the end as well, he played for a lot of teams, particularly near the end of his career when seemingly he was on a new team about every year. Do you think that has some bearing as to why he's not in the Hall of Fame? I know it's not a rational decision. You've outlined all the rational facts why he should be. Do you think, like, psychologically, the voters' mind that may contribute to him not being in the Hall of Fame?
I think there's a big distinction between the Hall of Very Good and the Hall of Fame. And usually you think of like players that maybe stayed for a team for a certain long period of time. And again, just not getting it's the Hall of Fame. So maybe not having like a lot of media attention around him or being like known as one of those top players. And because he bounced around so many teams, maybe I wasn't born in that era, but that was way before me. So I can't tell. But maybe from what I've gathered, maybe that he wasn't seen as like a top player, that no team could like hold him down to be their franchise center fielder.
I guess to add on to what John's saying is that the fact that he moved so much, it made him lose a lot of media time because he wasn't automatically, okay, I'm going to stay with this team and this team's going to give me the media. Since now the Hall of Fame considers stats, media, performance, and overall, I do believe it does take a huge factor with it, but now hopefully showing all of this, it does come into a much bigger consideration with him being in the Hall of Fame.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to echo, great job. Really interesting. I wonder if y'all looked at any of the sort of less favorable offensive stats for Kenny Lofton. I mean, he was great, got on base a lot, but didn't have great power numbers. And I was wondering if you thought about that and might present on that at some point.
It's very obvious he was not a very big power hitter. If you look at his home run stats, he wasn't very known for being able to go get the ball out of the park. But again, I think this was just an era that that skill set wasn't really appreciated to be able to get on base, and he's very big known as a base stealer. So I think it's nice to compare him to other players now, especially that like being not known for his stats of a big power hitter. I think it's very interesting.
Hi, I'm curious, could you just describe a little bit more about how you came up with the peer group that you used for the center fielders?
Okay, so we tried to gather like, I think it was 11 peers who played around the same era as him, but who had, I believe, different play styles. Because we didn't want to compare him to like 10 Kenny Lofton Juniors, right? We wanted different players. So I believe different play styles and overall same era, give or take a couple of years. I think that's where we chose our peers. That's it.
Yeah, go. We also want to consider that as game changes over time, we also want to make that everybody has that same advantage, that they have the same rules, that they played under the same stats, they were considered in the same way. So by considering the players that were in the same time as him, it would have that same limit to where the stats were considered.
I'm gonna tear my rotator cuff if I try to throw it. Where's it going to? Oh, it went back there. Jeez.
Sorry. Really nice presentation. Wish my school also had more people interested in sports analytics like this, but I just want to ask, have you ever thought of a way of maybe like finding a stat or quantifying media bias, which could have maybe affected like what happened like with him not getting inducted into the Hall of Fame eventually?
Well, again, this was way before we were born. So I think his class of 2013, when he was on the ballot, was a really stacked. It was very, very difficult for a lot of players to get into that ballot. And he was 9 votes away. I think he had 4-point-something percent of the votes. So if he had those 9 more votes, he would have been on the next year's ballot, which not to disclown anyone on the 2014 Hall of Fame ballot, but I think he would have had more chance of getting in compared to those players.
Thank you.